Tonight, we go one-on-one with John Hickenlooper.
I thought that the Senate was dysfunctional and broken. And it is.
Plus, one of the most controversial issues on your ballot. Prop 115 would ban abortions after 22 weeks. And our panel is back.
This is really a no-brainer.
I think it's short-sighted. That's ridiculous.
That is crack smoke crazy.
It's all right now on Unprecedented Politics. Good evening, I'm Matt Morrow, and this is Unprecedented Politics. Just 2 weeks to go until Election Day, and tonight the race to win the Senate is taking center stage. Look over here. Democrats need to net 4 seats to take control of the Senate. All of the states where Senate elections are happening are colored right here. Let's go ahead and start with the Democrats. They're probably going to lose this one right here in Alabama. Doug Jones, that seat's probably not going to stay his. Now, for the Republicans, the states they could lose or that will go down to the wire are growing by the day. Follow me here. We have Arizona. There is Montana, Iowa, Maine, plus North and South Carolina. And get this, not just 1, but 2 seats right here in Georgia. And lest we forget, good old Colorado right here. The incumbent, Gardner, is trailing in the polls. He has been doing that consistently for a few weeks now. Meanwhile, his opponent is former Governor John Hickenlooper. I recently sat down with him to talk about trust, ethics violations, and all those times he said he didn't even want to go to Washington. You're running for president. You had said a number of times you didn't want to be in the Senate. You didn't think you were cut out for the Senate. You didn't think you'd be a good senator. Obviously, you've changed your mind. We're sitting here talking about this right now. How can you make sure that people believe you and they trust you and that you're really into this tonight?
Well, I thought that the Senate was dysfunctional and broken. And it is. The bottom line, what I didn't really understand was that dysfunction was a result of people not working together, not listening to each other, and that all the skills I had as a mayor and a governor, those are the same skills you need in Washington. And I had a choice. I could sit in the cheap seats and be a critic, or I could try and go back and be part of the change.
COVID-19 is a major issue right now. Cases are spiking here in Denver, here in Colorado. That's why we're sitting outside and distant right now. If cases were to continue to increase all across the country, you end up in the Senate. Is there any kind of a national lockdown that you would support?
I think we have to rely on our top medical experts, our healthcare professionals. Whatever the healthcare professionals think is going to help this country the most, I'm all for it. But I don't think there's any way the federal government's going to, be able to enforce something like that. So it's really more of I think it's what they call guidance.
Does that go to the same for a mask mandate?
I think some sort of a federal mask mandate as a guidance is important and very useful.
Your ethics violations have been talked about a lot. You're found that you violated the state ethics laws on 2 different occasions, one for a trip to Connecticut on a plane ride, another for a limo ride in a Maserati in Italy. You say that you'll make sure that won't happen again. What can you do to assure people that if you're elected to the Senate, that you won't ever get close to potentially crossing that ethics barrier again?
Sure. Well, the Denver Post called these an honest mistake, relatively minor. There were reporting errors that were inadvertent, and I did. I paid the $2,700 fine. I take responsibility. But these were driven by a Republican dark money organization that was really just trying to create material for attack ads. And we saw that this summer. A $2,700 fine turns into $20 million worth of attack ads. I have worked as hard as I can my whole life to play by the rules, and I will always do that. And I'm not saying I'm going to be perfect, but I can guarantee, I can't imagine I'm ever going to have any issues with ethics ever again.
Do you regret taking those trips? So we'd be kind of more careful about those private opportunities later?
We had a whole team. We had 3 staff members, 2 of them lawyers, that looked at every trip, and they felt that they filled all the paperwork out perfectly. So, I take responsibility. It's my responsibility.
On court packing, Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts has said that he wants to expand the Supreme Court, add some justices. Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, said anything is on the table for the next term. Would you support adding justices to the Supreme Court?
That's not, I'm not a big fan of that. I think until this justice is confirmed by the Senate, I don't want to distract anybody's attention, because I think there are enough other senators that are in difficult races that I think it's 50-50 that somebody else is going to come forward and say, I'm not going to vote. That's my preference. I want to make sure that we that we keep the focus on these senators making a decision that they should be very thoughtful about.
So does that mean your decision on court packing is based upon whether Barrett's confirmed or not?
My decision on court packing depends on how these senators decide, not whether they approve it or not, whether they put it off.
So if they do approve her, would you be open to it then? If the Senate right now...
No, again, that's a hypothetical. By that time, there are going to be so many different things going on. I mean, that's outside the window of conjecture.
I've asked Senator Gardner's campaign to sit down with him multiple times. It hasn't happened yet, but tonight they tell me once again they are working on it. With that, let's bring in our panel. Democratic State Representative Leslie Herod, Colorado Rising Action Executive Director Michael Fields, Democratic Strategist and Dovetail Solutions CEO Andy Boyan, and District Attorney and the host of The George Show, George Brockler. Andy and Michael, let's start with you. Michael, is there anything you heard there or anything Cory Gardner could say at this point that is going to shift the momentum of this race?
Well, I mean, I think when you look at what Cory's up against, that he has to remind voters that he's worked hard for Colorado for years, and really look at who the alternative is. You just asked a bunch of questions to John Hickenlooper, a lot of which he skirted or didn't answer. His ethics violations were a habit, not a minor mistake, and he wouldn't answer again on court packing. And so I think you need to keep making that contrast. Look, Darrell Glenn was down 15 points in polling in 2016 at this point. He lost by 5.5 points. So this race is going to narrow, and I think you just need to keep hammering Hickenlooper and talking about your record if you're Cory Gardner.
All right, Cory Gardner's record, Andy Boyan, is it enough to try to save him in this race?
I think that's funny. You know, if you run a campaign as Cory Gardner is of, questioning moral and ethical bankruptcy of your opponent as the centerpiece, you can't afford to live in a glass house that's shattered by Donald Trump. This is a guy who was given 4 years to separate himself from Donald Trump. He drank the Tea Party's tea in 2014 by trying to kill the Affordable Care Act. This guy is a joke as a senator. And, you know, he talks about the four corners of Colorado and how important they are. He can't even leave Yuma, Colorado. He won't even do any town meetings in Denver. This is a guy who's going to lose this race. He's going to lose it badly. And what Republicans are doing are trying really hard to prop him up with somebody who's a do-nothing senator who's done nothing in the last 6 years and doesn't deserve a second term. See you, Cory.
A do-nothing senator. He's passed 11 bills. That's more than everybody else combined. He's passed the National Suicide Hotline. I think that's a big deal for a lot of Coloradans. And I think he has a great record.
The guy's a joke. He can't even come to Denver to do a town hall. He's too afraid.
Does it matter when it comes down to it if he does a town hall or not? As Michael mentioned there, Senator Cory Gardner has passed 11 bills. His latest one, a National Suicide Hotline, just got signed into law the other day.
He won't even talk to the mainstream media one-on-one. He's too afraid of that. Of course it makes a difference. If John Hickenlooper was willing to sit down to admit mistakes and say he's made mistakes, which he has, which we all have, and he's admitting to it, then of course it makes a difference. Yeah, he's afraid.
Okay, Leslie and George, let's bring you in here. George, did you hear anything in that interview or in one of the infinite TV ads that could change voters' minds when it comes to Cory Gardner at this point?
No. I mean, listen, it's the same tired excuses over and over again when he isn't trying to dodge an answer about court packing. Like, I'm not in favor of it. I don't like it, but I'm not saying I won't do it. It's this dodge about the ethics violations. I agree with Michael. It's much more habit forming. But this laugh about, well, I paid the $2,700. Let's be clear. He paid it only after being ordered to do it, after being compelled to appear for a subpoena that he failed to show up in. But I got to be honest, Matt, I'm not sure any of this is going to make a long-term difference. This is his race to lose. I think Cory's probably the only candidate that can beat him in this thing, but he continues to show that he is the luckiest man in Colorado politics. I mean, he fell backwards over the bodies of Dan May and Tom Tancredo in a year he had no business being governor. He ran into a candidate that ran out of funds in 2014 that should have beat him for governor in 2014. And now here he is having said, I don't want to be a senator. I wouldn't be a good senator, but I'm about to be a senator.
All right, Leslie, you were in the State House for 2 years when John Hickenlooper was in office. Do you have any reservations about him going to Washington to represent Colorado?
Absolutely not. I mean, you bring up a good point. Colorado knows who John Hickenlooper is, and that's why we're going to send him to Washington to represent us. All of this stuff about ethics violations, you know, he made a mistake and he paid for it. That's fine. We have much larger issues with Cory Gardner being a rubber stamp for Donald Trump. And you want to talk about ethics? He's talking about, Hickenlooper is not ethical and Trump is. I mean, come on. All you have to do is open up your phone and turn on Twitter to see who's the morally upstanding candidate and the morally upstanding person. And I think that that's hugely problematic, that we're going to send someone with such an infatuation to Trump back to Washington when we know we need to clean up his mess.
All right, stay right there. Next on Unprecedented Politics, voter turnout is shattering records and a big change for the final presidential debate. Plus,
it's a one-size-fits-all arbitrary limit on when someone can access essential health care.
5 months is a big baby. And when we're talking about dismembering a child.
Prop 115, should Colorado join 43 other states in banning abortions at some point during pregnancy? It is a controversial plan with a lot of money behind it, both for and against the proposition. You see that right here. And as we sit here tonight, tens of millions of people have already cast their ballots. In fact, more than 30 million Americans have voted, this according to the Elections Project. Take a look. Here in Colorado, more than 640,000 people have voted. That's almost a quarter of all the votes coming in from 2016. And there is this tonight. The Commission on Presidential Debates announcing a big change for the final debate this Thursday. There will be a mute button for both President Trump and Joe Biden. Andy and George, let's start with you. George, is going to make a difference? Is it a good idea for the debate?
I think it's a great idea. I think that too often politicians run away from the rules that are set there. And I think if they had a kill switch to cut these folks off, I think that's all the better. I think it's actually going to help the president, too, because the more Joe Biden talks, the more people figure out that he runs out of words. This is a guy who will start a sentence, get halfway through it, and then abandon it with, well, I guess the thing. So I think it's actually a benefit to Trump.
If that is the case, Andy, why in the last presidential debate did the president just not let Joe Biden go and let the Americans see that for themselves?
Exactly, because the president's a weak candidate. He's got nothing to say, so he keeps repeating the same thing over and over again. And he's got people like George convinced that he's the better candidate. He'll interrupt the vice president. He won't give equal time. He'll completely ignore the moderator. He's a rule breaker, and besides that, he can't stop talking about things that are completely untrue. He can't stop lying. But he's got George convinced, so he's got one vote in Colorado at least.
He's got more than that. And by the way, Joe Biden should thank the president for talking over the top of him so he didn't have to put more than 4 words together at a time.
Right. That's called actually rude. It's called not following the rules. Something you just said he should do. So why don't you not convince yourself?
I'm excited to see how Joe performs.
All right, we'll find out how they perform, both of them, in 48 hours. Michael and Leslie, to you, let's talk about this voter turnout. According to Target Smart, 53% of these early votes are from Democrats, more African Americans, more young voters are casting their ballots early than in 2016. Leslie, do you think this bode well for Democrats, or is it really too early to tell?
Absolutely, it bodes well for Democrats. I mean, we are seeing astronomical turnout across the state of Colorado. Democrats are leading, and the enthusiasm is so high. I'm so excited. Everyone out there, make sure that you have a plan to vote too, and vote early. We are going to see the highest voter turnout in Colorado history. I guarantee it. It's going to be pretty amazing to see. And I know we're going to turn over those votes for the Biden-Harris ticket, but also for the entire Democratic ticket, because we know that we have the party that will move us forward and fix some of this mess that we're in right now.
All right, Michael, are you concerned that so many Democrats are voting this early? Are Republicans potentially in trouble here in Colorado and nationwide?
No, I don't think that it's a surprise at all. Nationwide, 60% of Democrats said that they were going to vote early. 60% of Republicans said they'd vote on Election Day. Here in Colorado, Democrats are getting their ballots in quicker. But when it comes down to it, 80% of Democrats will vote, 80% of Republicans, and about 70% of unaffiliated. Republicans are slower returning their ballot this year, but they're going to show up. So no, it doesn't worry me at all in terms of what might happen. The battleground polls for the presidential race are 1 point better than they were in 2016 for Trump. So it's going to be a close race. It's going to be interesting. But I don't think you can tell much from this voter turnout so far.
It's going to be an exciting 2 weeks. Say real quick, Andy, real quick, last word.
Just going to say, today the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the favor of the Democrats in Pennsylvania, which is a key a key decision tonight that really can affect how Pennsylvania turns out for D's or R's.
All right,
I mean, they made a critical vote tonight.
What that does for people who may not know, as long as those ballots are postmarked by Election Day, they have 3 extra days to go ahead and be counted. Michael, Leslie, Andy, and George, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And a reminder, you can watch that next presidential debate this Thursday at 7 o'clock, and it really doesn't matter where you are because we'll be streaming it live on the Fox 31 News app. Well, both sides of a controversial proposition that would put an end to abortion in Colorado after 22 weeks. That's next.
If you thought the stakes couldn't get any higher in this election when it comes to reproductive health care, they just did.
Supporters and opponents of Proposition 115 in Colorado say they know more people are watching the movement of the proposal after Bader Ginsburg's passing. Proposition 115 would ban abortions past 5 months of pregnancy with enough yes votes this election. A representative of the proposition says she wants voters to know her intent is not to take away the right to an abortion.
You know, Ginsburg was a great jurist, and she did a lot to advance the rights of women. But right here, we are concentrating on restricting late-term abortion. This is something very reasonable, that we are not trying to take away the rights of women to decide what to do with their pregnancy.
But opponents argue the measure would be the first step to do just that.
That bans abortion later in pregnancy with no exceptions for rape, for risks to a pregnant woman's health, or if she receives a lethal fetal diagnosis. There's nothing reasonable about Proposition 115. It's cruel.
The proposition does call for an exception if a doctor says the life of the mother is at risk during the pregnancy. Instead of including other exceptions, supporters say they believe there should be more education and alternatives for people considering abortions.
Why 22 weeks is because it involves a lot of risks for the mother. So it's just important for us to give alternatives to the mother. And one thing that it was very close to my heart is not to penalize, criminalize at all to the woman that has an abortion.
Gabrielle Franklin, Fox 31.
That'll do it for Unprecedented Politics tonight. I'm Matt Morrow. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you back here for more on Wednesday. Good night.